What if the key to aging well isn't just planning for the future, but learning how to laugh, create, and care more deeply right now? Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies that help us live longer, healthier, and more purposeful lives. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age. My guest has spent her life using creativity and humor to build bridges between people of all ages and cultures. Marilyn Raichle founded the Seattle International Children's Festival, created the Foolproof Comedy Festival, and later launched the Art of Alzheimer's, a movement that celebrates the creativity alive in people living with dementia. Her deepest transformation came as a family caregiver for parents with dementia. Rather than walking away, she chose to reimagine caregiving through the arts, showing that aging, even with dementia, can still be a time of connection, meaning, and growth. She is also the author of Don't Walk Away, A Care Partner's Journey, and she joins us today to talk about creativity, humor, caregiving, and what it truly means to age well. Well, Marilyn, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Now, you've spent your life in festivals, comedy, and storytelling. Where did your belief in creativity as a lifelong force begin?
Out of desperation in a family that was, there were 5 in our family and I was the 4th. And it was a very competitive family. It was a very contentious family. And I went into the arts basically as a form of defense. It was the one place I could find respite. It was safe and it was fun. So that's where it basically started. I mean, one of the first things I did, and this is probably a scene from some movie, I think it was Harold and Maude, but one of the things I did, my father, when he came home from work, he was always angry because he hated his job and he would yell and scream. And so one day when I was about 9, I went into the hall closet and I hid there until he opened the hall closet. And when he opened it, I fell out as if I had hung myself. And he didn't know what to do. So he went down into his workshop until dinner and everything was safe. I did this for 2 years. Everyone in the family would line up outside the hall closet waiting for me to fall out. And I think to my father, it must have been some way of telling him that I loved him, that I was doing this for him. So it started early.
That's wild. I've not heard a story like that before. So
yeah, it was an interesting family.
So what did founding the Seattle International Children's Festival teach you about connection across generations?
Oh, well, that was amazing. It was for so many people, for so many children, it was their first exposure to other cultures in a positive way. And one weekend we had 50,000 kids there with their parents. And it was just this incredibly joyful experience where we had performers from all over the world. And everyone was having fun and everybody was learning something. And it was joyous.
So how did comedy and humor shape your understanding of aging?
Well, I once read this book called Anatomy of an Illness by Norman Cousins, and he was talking a lot about how bringing humor into your life and living with humor. And that's when I basically started the comedy festival because I wanted to bring more humor into everybody's life. And it's a defense mechanism. It's a way to live that is happy and peaceful, and inventive. It was, it made, I think, the ability to infuse your life with positive thoughts and humor and laughter. And when you laugh, you share things with others. You're sharing laughter with others. And that was the other important thing. And so when I was with Mom and would be visiting her in assisted living, the laughter was always important because it was a sharing experience with everyone there.
I grew up with that kind of laughter. My dad has all kind of weird jokes, and my kids think I'm insane when I bring them up. I mean, there's certain things that we just call them dad jokes, and they're not the dad jokes that you hear everybody talk about. They're my dad jokes, and they've just like lived on forever. And I try and pass them on. You know, like
Oh, like
I can't
what?
drive by I can't drive by a cemetery without saying, "Oh, people are dying to get in there," or,
Okay, this
or
sounds like my family.
yeah. And we'd go out to eat, and this drives my wife insane, but mispronounce certain desserts like creamy brulee and tiramisu. And I got her one time. When we were living in Michigan, we went out. I just think we took a weekend up to like Traverse City or something like that, and we're at a restaurant. And I kept saying, "Oh, we should get the tiramisu for dessert. We should get the tiramisu." I kept saying it over and over again. When the waiter came out, my wife Pam ordered. She said, "We'll have the tiramisu." And the waiter kind of looks weird, walks away. And I said, "What did you order?" "The tiramisu." And I said, "No, you didn't." And she said, "Oh my," she was so embarrassed.
The tiramisu, that's
Yeah.
cute.
So we did that kind of stuff. And my kids get really annoyed by it. And I tell some of the same jokes over and over again. It was just like you'd say something to my dad and you just waited for the outcome because you knew what he was going to say. You know, there's just certain words. And so it was fun. It's part of the family and we pass it on. It's, I think, genetic.
That's nice.
Yeah. So becoming a caregiver, and you just mentioned your mom, but becoming a caregiver changed your life. What was the hardest part of that transition?
Well, the hardest part was we were told from the time we were kids to walk away. Mother said, "When your father and I get Alzheimer's, I want you to walk away. We're not going to remember you. We won't know. You won't, there's nothing you can do. So go live your life and walk away." And so we heard this from the time we were kids. So that was the hardest part because that's what we were told to do. And we all thought that was a good idea. They lived in a really good continuing care facility. They had enough money to do that. And they were together. Mom and dad were together for 72 years when he died. And so when I got back from graduate school and there were no jobs because it was during the recession. So my family said, "Okay, we're going to pool our resources and we're going to keep you afloat. You're going to be the family caregiver." I had no interest in doing that. I was taught to walk away. That's what I believed in. And I also was told by Mom that Alzheimer's was like a death. It was actually worse than death. And so my whole attitude towards it was just like what most people's are today. It was just like, I don't want to talk about it. It's just too scary. So there I was. It was my new job. Didn't pay well, but that was my job. And Mother and Dad, they lived in this great place and most of their care was taken care of. So I was there to do all the extraneous things and try to keep them engaged and amused. And so that was the hardest part because I didn't know anything and I didn't want to know anything. And when I was there, I would always just hear my mother's voice in the back of my head going, "Walk away, walk away." And I'd look at the clock and I'd wait until I could walk away. So I was not a good caregiver. And I hasten to say that I was not a family caregiver who have the toughest job around. They're operating without a net. Most of them are juggling the needs of family and jobs and their loved one who is living with dementia. And it's tough. So given all of that, I was not good. Slowly over time, I slowed down and I started to realize that Mom wanted the best for Dad because he had Parkinson's. So he was developing his own form of dementia. And Dad wanted the best for Mom and I wanted the best for both of them. So our needs merged. And so we sort of coexisted with that. And it was really, really hard because I didn't know what to do. And I wasn't good at it. And I didn't want to know. So I wasn't learning much because every day I was there, but I wasn't learning much. I was doing the best I could under the circumstances, but I was not good. It was only after Dad died that everything changed.
Wow. So your parents basically kind of got sick at roughly the same time?
Well, they both started Mom started to develop memory loss in her early 80s. Dad's Parkinson's started to accelerate in his early 80s. So yeah, and they were living in this place. And so she would just become furious at the nurses who would help Dad dress and undress because he needed help. And that was her job. And so every time Dad would do something like that, or if he fell down, which he did every once in a while. He fell down 22 times in 1 year and didn't break a bone.
Wow.
But Mother, whenever he would fall, Mother would turn to him and chirp, "Hop up, Bob." And sometimes he would try to hop up and then fall down. And sometimes he wouldn't. And once I went up to her and I said, "Mom, Dad can't hop up. He's in a wheelchair. And if he hops up, he could fall." And she said, "No, he's not. He's not in a wheelchair." She just didn't see it. All she saw was her wonderful husband. So they were accelerating at the same time. And it was starting to, when I got back from graduate school, they were entering like about 86. And that's when it started to accelerate.
To say that had to be hard is probably an obvious understatement.
Well, it was harder for them than for me. it was, and by that time I was sort of helping. It was, I was always trying to inject humor into their lives. We would find, and Mother and I always played Scrabble. Whenever we got there, we played Scrabble. We played Scrabble every day until the day she died, at 96. And so we developed a routine. We would look at the view. Dad couldn't take trips anymore. He couldn't, I couldn't take them for drives near the lakes and things like that. And Mom didn't want to leave Dad at this point. She considered herself Dad's caregiver. So it was hard, but it was just sort of, okay, that's life. That's my job.
So why did you create the Art of Alzheimer's instead of stepping away from caregiving?
Well, it was interesting because after Dad died, Mom was incredibly bored because they'd been together for 72 years. And there was this painting class for people with memory loss. And I took her to the class and she thought that painting was a stupid thing to do. And she didn't think that anything of it. And I didn't expect anything, but her painting was just extraordinary. It was lovely. I had no idea. And I was so fascinated by the art that I kept going back every week to painting class. And I would take her painting because otherwise she'd throw it away because she thought it was stupid. And so I saved them all and I started sharing them with people and started sharing with my family and other people. And the reaction was always the same. It was, I had no idea. And that's when it was like, okay, I'm going to start sharing this art with as many people as possible because I used to say, Alzheimer's is scary, art isn't. And if you start with something fun, like the art, then they go, oh, this is interesting. And then they're willing to think about it because they've seen something positive and wonderful that they hadn't ever considered before. And so that's when the Art of Alzheimer's happened. And I was sharing art with lots and lots of people, and I was doing art exhibits. We did one art exhibit called The Artist Within, and that had paintings by people living with dementia aged 60 to 101. And that played all over King County in Seattle. That was probably seen by 100,000 people. And so that to me was like, it was so much fun. And the art was so fascinating from everybody. Some of the art was just simply extraordinary. I mean, that made Mother's art like really, really interesting. But this one woman, she was an artist. And that led to my shift from what I would consider a caregiver to a care partner. Because one day I was looking at her art and to me it looked like it was deteriorating. Same scratchy lines, same themes, same colors, and it looked to me, as if she was losing interest. And so I got there early, the day of the painting class, and we did everything she liked to do. We took a walk, a power walk. She was a power walker. We took a walk. We looked at the view. We played Scrabble. And then I took her to the painting class, and her painting completely changed. All of a sudden, there were these warm animal images, just wonderful. And again, a new transformation in her art. And that's when I got it. I went, oh, I see. I have a role to play in this. We're partners. And that's when Mom and I started a life as partners, working together to build a life for both of us that was better and more fulfilling. And that's what I did with Mom for the next 9 years. And my whole demeanor with Mom changed from having to be there to take care of her to needing to be there because it was so much fun and it was so interesting. And I kept learning. Every single day I learned something about bringing joy and happiness to people who live with dementia. And one of the first thing everybody learns is never ask those questions like, do you remember or don't you remember? Because she doesn't, and it's only going to frustrate her and frustrate you. And I embraced the moment. And we just started living in the moment, and I just stopped trying to bring her back and enjoyed the moment. And it was the best decision I've ever made in my entire life, that being with Mom and all of her companions made me a better person, a happier person. It was to this day remains the best thing I've ever done.
If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast. It's such a beautiful lesson you're bringing to our viewers and listeners that, we tend to focus on the caregiving part, but I like that care partner part.
Yeah.
And I have a friend, Andy Lozier, who, kind of keep a story short, he was a wrestling coach back east for college and decided he was going to raise money for his team by biking from Connecticut to St. Louis, Missouri in 7 days. Wow. To raise money for the team. And along the way, it was just, getting to where he was, the pain and the fatigue and everything else. And he was just sitting on the curb, kind of taking a rest. And he's like, I have to, and I forget what he had to do. It was like bike another 20 miles or something like that. And he's like, no, you don't have to. You get to. And think of the people who would love to ride a bike but can't because they don't have legs or whatever. Yeah. And he developed this whole kind of philosophy of from get to have, or have to get.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the transformation you went through, is that we tend to look at it, we have to care for these people, but no, we get to.
Yeah.
And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful story you're telling.
Yeah, it was, and it was one of the very first things I learned is that I always assumed that Mother would be excited to see me because I'm her daughter. Of course she'd be excited to see me. And then it very quickly dawned on me that she had a new family, and she was far more interested in her new family than she was in me. She liked to see me, but her new family was really, really the linchpin of her life now. And fortunately for me, her new family was willing to accept me as a member. So I had 6 new adopted mothers, and that became my new world. And when I would tell people that I would visit Mom in assisted living, which at this point was every day, all the time, to relax, they would just look at me like I was crazy. But it was so peaceful because there were no deadlines. All there was the moment, living in the moment, and living with happiness and living with love. And love was not a word that was ever spoken in my family growing up. So this, to me, was fabulous. I mean, it was like a discovery that you could do this.
So what kinds of creativity did you still see alive in people who are living with dementia?
Oh, so much. First of all, their curiosity. They're just very, very curious, anxious to learn more, to understand things, always to be of value, to have friends, to do fun things. I mean, Mom and her two best friends, Phyllis and Kathleen, were always on the hunt for something interesting to do. And I would get there and I would see the three of them and they would say, okay, we're going to go out to the garden and we're looking for something to do. The art class was interesting because Mom wasn't that interested in the art. She was interested in the group of people all sitting at the table together. She was interested in the community of people. And I think that was also a motivation for many of the people who took place, that it was an opportunity to be with people. And so that there were painting classes, there was music. Once we had a drum circle come in, it was creativity gives people a chance to express things in ways that we might not understand, because when Mother would paint, say, pink primroses, it would look like this little creature with legs. Really interesting, but Mother was always transforming things. Other people were different, but they just enjoyed being with each other. And I think that's a motivation for so much, is that need for family, need for friendship. And so, but was always amazed at how creative people were in music, in even in dance. They would, just start listening to music. They would start dancing. But the art was, for me, because Mother grew up in a family where the arts were very prominent. That my grandfather wrote poetry and Mom played the piano from the time she was like 6, but never painting. Painting was, for some reason. I asked my Aunt Louise once, Mom's little sister, kid sister. I said, "Did you ever paint?" And she said, "No." They played musical instruments, but they didn't paint. I don't know why. Maybe that's one reason Mother always resisted the fact that she ever painted, because she denied painting anything. And you would compliment her on her painting. She said, "I didn't do that." So, okay. Once she admitted to one of her paintings, because she's so competitive, we painted together for the first time. And that's because they thought maybe she should stop painting because she started to drink the paint. So I got there to make sure she wasn't drinking the paint. And so I painted. And at the end of the class, we looked at our paintings and she said, "I like mine best." And it was really unusual that she allowed the fact that she actually painted that. It didn't last long. About half an hour later, she didn't do it. But so yeah, there was tremendous amount of life, zest for life in people who are living with dementia that we tend to miss out on. One of the things I always tell people when they have family members who are developing dementia or memory loss, I say, try to share joy. Because if your entire framework is nothing but loss and sorrow, that's all you're going to see. And if you give them an opportunity to enjoy something, then you can see that person emerge because they're having fun. And then you can see that thing. And it's a revelation. And we don't, we have this image of people in nursing homes sort of sitting there like this. Well, they're bored to tears. You give them anything to do that is fun and exciting, even if it's chair yoga, anything, they're going to blossom. Because we're treating each other like human beings.
So what do most families kind of misunderstand about dementia and identity?
Depends on what level they're at. But most people, so people who haven't yet begun that journey, or people who are terrified of the journey, they see people living with dementia as no longer there, that they're gone. My sister once said to me, well, Mom left us years ago. And I said, well, if she left, who's there? And I would suspect, and I would recommend that it's somebody well worth getting to know. So we don't think their lives have meaning. We don't think they're there. And so people would say, well, I don't visit because she isn't going to remember anyway. And then they don't visit the next time or the next time because they feel guilty about not having visited. So then they don't visit. And then they're even more of a stranger the next time they show up. So that and I think a lot of it is they're afraid of how they would feel if they had dementia. Well, you don't, and it's not about you. I think the thing they misunderstand when they're trying to relate to their family member who is living with memory loss is that it's not about you, it's about them. And that even if they don't remember you, just having you there and them engaging with you is going to have positive results. It's going to be something that they're going to remember, whether they can acknowledge it or not, that it does good things. And so for people, it's like, it's not about you. Relax. I always just tell people, just ask a question and hop on for the ride. And then once you realize that they're there, then realize that there's a tremendous amount of talent and creativity available there. That there are all sorts of things they might like to do. One of the big lessons I learned is to ask questions and to listen. There was one question that Mother asked over and over and over again. She said, what do you think Seattle's going to be like in 50 years? Sometimes she changed the time frame to 200 years, but it was always, what do you think it's going to be like? And I would come up with little ideas of what I thought it would be like, and then I'd change the subject because I found it boring. And then I finally realized, well, if she keeps asking, it must mean something to her. So I finally asked her, well, what do you think it's going to be like in 50 years? All of a sudden, all sorts of ideas started flooding out. She said, it's going to be too crowded. There won't be anywhere to live. Maybe we'll all fly. And then her big one was, maybe women will wear skirts again. She was sort of fixated on the idea her grandmother would be so upset that women weren't wearing skirts, even though Mother didn't wear skirts. It's to relax and listen, ask questions, and listen. And I think that, and share joy. That if you tell people who have family members to share joy, they look at you like they don't know what you're talking about because they're not feeling any joy. And if you can let that, it's not about you. Just remember, it's not about you. It's about them and what makes them happy and what engages them. Their being engaged is the important thing.
This is one of the most important conversations I think we've had on the Aging Well podcast.
And so the other thing I will say that, and I learned this late, that the enduring personhood of human beings, that there are certain things we all share, whether we have dementia or whether we don't, until the day we die. And the need for friends and companionship, the need for laughter, the need to be of value is a big one. The need to love and to be loved. That these are things we share. These are human beings. So I don't think of them as, oh, these are people with dementia, and then there's us. And we see the world differently. We have different perspectives, but we're all experiencing the same things, just differently.
So how can humor be used respectfully in caregiving and aging?
Oh, well, don't even think about respectful. Think about humor, about how it's something that makes you laugh. I'm trying to think of something that would make Mother laugh. Everything made Mother laugh. Oh gosh, I wish I had a good analogy. Mother just loved to laugh. She we'd walk around the halls and we'd see something that she thought was funny, and then she would just laugh, and then I would laugh, and I would share that laughter with her. Sorry, I should have come prepared with a better anecdote than that.
No, that's okay.
But mother enjoyed to laugh. And I'll think of something as time goes on. But she laughed, and she laughed with her friends. So I'm sorry I don't have one.
That's okay. It's interesting that I feel like society has somewhat learned its capacity to embrace humor. You and I grew up with the likes of Don Rickles and those types of comedians, and they wouldn't be around anymore. I mean, because it's just not acceptable in our society. And I feel like, when it comes to caregiving and aging, we got to be able to laugh at ourselves, and we got to be able to find the joy and the humor in the situations. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes humor is off color a little bit, and sometimes it might offend, but it gets us into a different place. And I love humor. I mean, I use it inappropriate as much as possible.
For me, it was, for me, it was a lifesaver, but then it was also it pointed you away from sadness and enabled you to feel happy. And Mother was happy, whether she was laughing or not. She was happy. Compliments were another thing. It was really tough in our family. You were not allowed. If you complimented somebody, generally speaking, the best recourse was to change the subject, preferably to something depressing. Because if you accept a compliment, it assumes that you thought you deserved the compliment. And in our family, Scottish Calvinists, that was not a good thing. And so it's best to change the conversation to something depressing, and then people will stop complimenting you, and then the problem is solved. But Mother changed that. She started complimenting everybody in assisted living. She was always complimenting people. She was still hard for her to accept a compliment. If you told her she played the piano well, she deliberately hit a false note just to prove to you that you were wrong. But she loved to give compliments. And that was the first time I actually realized that it's best to begin a conversation with a smile and a compliment. I had no idea. It was lovely. It was so much fun. Such a different reaction. And that's the other myth about people who live with dementia, where you hear, I became the parent and she became the child. Mother was always my mother. She was always teaching me something. I never thought of her as a child. She was always Mom. I wanted her to have fun, but she was always Mom.
Because I think we forget that our parents are allowed to, there's no age. I mean, when people say, act your age, it's like, well, I'm 84 years old. How am I supposed to act? I've never been 84 years before. I mean, or 90 or whatever it might be. It's like, we need to embrace that childlike personality, and we should get our parents to enjoy that.
Yeah, what would you want them to be sad, solemn?
Yeah.
But no, Mother was always happy and always helping people. She was always looking for something to do. I mean, this was one thing that she always wanted to be of value. Well, I always wanted to have something to do. So whenever I was doing something, like once I called her up and I said, I have to go weed the yard. And she said, can I help? And I said, well, it's a very dirty job. She said, I don't mind. And I said, okay, I'll have to get you some gloves. She said, well, maybe you can just tell me what to do and I'll watch. And I said, okay. And it was, but she always wanted to be of value. So one day, collaborated with the kitchen staff, and at the dining room at lunchtime, they had all these napkins that needed to be folded. And I said, Mom, would you help us fold the napkins? And Mother just immediately, quickly folded all the napkins and put them at people's tables. And I said, Mother, you're the folder in chief. Thank you. He said, welcome. And then I would do this every day. And sometimes I would take all the napkins after she'd folded them. When she looked away, I would grab them all up and throw them back down. I said, can you help us fold the napkins? And she would say, yes. It was sometimes memory loss is helpful because she immediately forgot that she had done that. But she wanted to do it again. And so that I was laughing a lot. Mother was very busy. But for me, it was just happiness.
Let's pause for a moment to thank the affiliate partners who help support the Aging Well podcast. We're not sponsored and no company pays for airtime here. But when you use our affiliate links, it helps us keep producing thoughtful, evidence-informed content. One brand I genuinely trust is Oral Wellness, especially their Glutarol, Glutarol Plus, and copper peptide formulations. I've spent time vetting their science, their ingredient quality, and their transparency. And I personally use these products in my own wellness routine. If you're interested in supporting the podcast and exploring tools that may help you feel and function better, check out Oral Wellness in the show notes. I love this. This is such an uplifting conversation because too often we talk about caregiving, it just becomes such a downer.
Right.
And not embracing the great opportunity that we have when we get to be caregivers with our parents. And I'm almost feeling like, wow, I didn't have the fortunate opportunity to be a caregiver for my parents. And my dad was living in Arizona, and he was overall relatively healthy and just didn't wake up one day. My stepmother called me on a Sunday morning, and I knew something was up. I thought he was in the hospital, but she said, your dad didn't, pass in his sleep.
How old?
He was probably 86, I believe. So he was, I think young. I have a mentality now that, I want to live to be 120. So 86 becomes very, very young. And then my mom, they were divorced. And so she was in Maryland. And she had, there's I think it was like a stricture in her esophagus where food wasn't passing well enough into her stomach. And actually it would kind of build up. It's almost like she had a stomach in her esophagus, but it wasn't digesting food. And she'd end up, throwing up. And nobody really knew that she wasn't getting enough food. And, eventually, she spent, I think it was about a week in the hospital. And we were all over the place. I'm here in Oregon. I have a sister in West Virginia. One is in Maryland, nearby my mom. And then my youngest sister at the time was in Iowa. And so we had, it was almost daily Skype calls to talk with her and, go through things. But, none of us really had that caregiver opportunity. It was just kind of, we're spending these last few days just, enjoying my mom's company. And then my youngest sister kind of took over many of the responsibilities of being like, doing all the legal work and all that kind of stuff. And God bless her for doing that, because that's not stuff I would enjoy doing. And I don't think she enjoyed doing it either. But, I'm here listening, it's like, wow, I feel deprived of that opportunity to have really been a caregiver. And and if you know that it's not going to be this horrible, sad thing, but if you know the tools to help you find the joy, and then you can just start, then it changes you. Then you want to do it all the time. It kind of reminded me too of, we were talking earlier about the twisted humor in my family. When my grandfather passed away, we're at the funeral, and my cousins, all the male cousins, were kind of gathered around, and my dad's cousin Stanley comes walking up, and he's like, I guess this is where all the good-looking guys are. And I said, it was. It's like, and my first kind of response inside was like, I can't believe I'm cracking jokes at my grandfather's funeral. But it's like, that's the way we were, it's like, you're not changing the fact that he's passed and he was in a state of kind of suffering. So it was his time to go, and let's just celebrate his life.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what's important as we get to those later years.
There was a rule in our family, again, going back to Scottish Calvinists, there were rules about death that when someone died, you were not allowed to have funerals, you were not allowed to have memorial services, and you were not allowed to cry. Because every Scottish Calvinist knows they're going to heaven, and so to mourn is an unnecessary, again, indulgence. And so that was the rule. So you weren't allowed to cry. You weren't, none of that. And with Mom, she actually made me laugh on her deathbed, which is not easy to do. And she didn't mean it, but they grew up in this banking family during the Depression, and they hated Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Hated him. And so every time she heard the name Roosevelt, she'd go, "We didn't like him." I said, "I know, Mom." So she is 96. Her blood sugar had spiked to 600. She was in a coma. And the doctors told us she had 2 days to live. So my brother and sister and I were standing around her. We're singing to her. We're telling her we love her. And I mentioned her dislike of the Roosevelt Hotel, and Mom flinched in a coma. And I knew she could hear me, and I knew she could understand me. So I spent the next 2 days with her, holding her hand and talking. But again, it's like turning this very funny moment. And it wasn't funny to Mom, but it was funny to me. I thought it was hysterical. Mother was a source of joy to me. I was trying to bring joy to her life, but she was equally joy to me. And what I realized after so many years is that what enables people living with dementia to live happy lives works the same for everybody, everywhere. So it expanded my understanding of the world and of life. And all of her companions, Mother played the same song for years. She played the piano since she was about 6. And in her later years, reading sheet music was no longer possible. So she created her own special medley. This is Mother being funny, but it was her medley. She played this exactly the same way for like years. It started with Silent Night, and at exactly the same moment, every single time it would morph into Polly Wolly Doodle All Day. And her skills of playing were still fabulous. So I made videos of Mom doing this just because they were so funny. And that brought her joy, brought me enormous amounts of joy. We were just sharing joy all the time. And all these people that were my new family. So one of the things I started doing is when I would visit them, I would give them all shoulder massages. And they wouldn't necessarily know what a shoulder massage was because I would always ask permission. But then I'd point to the woman next to them who was going like this, ah, and then they'd want one too. So one day, Gloria came up to me, and she just had her massage. She came up to me and she said, "Do you tuck your wings in a handkerchief when you're not here?" Those were what my days were like. And they were just this is another example of how they just found joy everywhere. When 2 days after Mom died, I went back to assisted living because I wanted to be with all my family. And Ruby, who was from Atlanta, held up this red plastic flower. And she said, "I think about Jean every time I see this. You want to know why?" I said, "Why?" And she said, "'Cause she tried to eat it." So there I was laughing and having fun with these. It took a force of will to rejoin the world away from these women in assisted living. I mean, with the shoulder massages, it got to the point where everybody would want one. Even members of the staff wanted them. And once I went over to the men's table, because usually I was at the ladies' table. And I went over to the men's table, and there was this man named Harry. And I started to give him his massage. And all of a sudden little chirps of sound started to emerge. He would go, ah, ah. And then this song emerged and he started to sing. And the whole dining room was just wrapped with attention. And I finally had to stop because the soup was getting cold and, all the food was getting cold. And I stopped and the entire dining room erupted into applause for Harry. I should say everyone's wild about Harry. That it was so that everything was fun.
These are beautiful stories. I'm loving them. And makes me want to know why do we have to recapture it? Why do we lose that creativity as we get older? And what's one simple creative practice we can all start today?
Ask questions. Listen, ask questions. Because they have something to say and most people aren't interested. It's difficult. Some people, it would be know something about what you're doing that it would be difficult. It's difficult sometimes when people are really, really self-absorbed and they're still removed, that it's easier when people are, talking to you. But there are all sorts of stories of people who haven't spoken in a really long time, who are incredibly withdrawn. And if you find out what triggers them, usually it has something to do with religious music or gospel music. You start singing, and it's astonishing how many times they will start singing with you. But with your own parents, it's ask them questions about their lives. They love talking about their lives. They love teaching us things. I mean, give them the respect that they deserve. Ask them questions. It's interesting with Scrabble, because Mom and I literally played Scrabble. When she couldn't make words anymore, we would just add up the scores because she was very competitive. We'd add up the numbers on the tiles, and that was the thing. But once, and this was really, she was probably 95 when this happened. And I don't know if you've ever played Scrabble.
Long time ago.
Okay. Well, there's certain words that will get you lots of points. And if you get a word on a triple, it triples. And so they were playing Scrabble and she was having a hard time with the word. And she kept asking me, is dog a word? And then all of a sudden she stopped. And she looked at me. And she said, sometimes your brain just gets in the way. And she made jewel on the triple. Mother always surprised me. She was always surprising me, because if you think you know what they're capable of, if you think you know what they're doing, if you think you know what they're thinking, you're probably wrong. Ask questions, listen. That's the most important thing, I think. And slow down and smile.
I love that. I asked you for a creative practice, and the response was to ask questions and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of us would think of creativity like that? Some might think, well, people can do whatever the art they enjoy, try learning a new instrument or, start painting. But I think you answered with the most creative thing that we could possibly do is ask questions and listen, because that's where we interact the most with people and where we draw out the most. I don't even know how to express myself here because my creative writing is failing me right now. But
yeah.
I think that was a beautiful answer. And I think it's so, so important for us to understand that to really, truly be creative is ask questions, engage with people. How often do we do that in our society anymore?
Well, it's something that I had to learn. It's something I try to do because it's really, really good. I did it more often when I was with Mom, but I have to remind myself two things when I talk to people, because I'll start to forget. It's not about me. Never start with a story about how I'm doing. Always ask how they're doing. That's what they're going to respond to. They're not that interested in what I'm doing unless they ask. And And I had to learn how to listen, because in our family, winning was the most important thing. And I wasn't involved in listening, I was involved in winning. And so these were life lessons that I am still putting into practice. And sometimes it takes effort because they're not first nature to me, but it's better.
I think our Scottish roots are very common.
So is Armstrong your Scottish name?
Yes, we were one of the notorious border clans. The Armstrong clan was on the southern border of Scotland. In fact, just 2 years ago, we got the opportunity to go visit Ireland and Scotland and visit we always call it the family castle, but it's really just more of the tower. It's called Gilnockie Tower. It's kind of where the clan kind of had its roots.
We were the McPhees. Mom was McPhee, okay. And they sided with every losing faction in wars. And they finally ended up leaving the mainland and going off the coast of Glasgow to this island called, I should remember this, good God. At any rate, they moved to this island, and that's where they lived. And none of us have ever been to the island because it's really tough to go there. And there are no places to stay. It's sort of rustic, but that's where the family went. So it was.
The Armstrongs were kind of ultimately run out of Scotland.
Oh.
They used to, they basically fight for. There was not a lot of loyalty, which is kind of surprising because I feel like my family, myself, were very, very loyal people, but. Maybe that's where we deterred a little bit from the historical Armstrongs. But
so where did they go? Just to mainland?
Yeah, they ended up, in the United States and in Australia is where you find a lot of the Armstrongs have gone. So.
Our family, for some reason, came from Glasgow. This portion of them moved to Halifax, and then they followed the railroad and came to Seattle.
Okay.
And got involved in construction.
Like you told me before we started recording, you've been in Seattle for
18.
It's going up on 200 years now, huh? It's like 175 years or so.
Lots and lots of cousins here. Lots of cousins.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And the family, we had a family picnic every summer. We would get all together, and at the end, we would all join hands and sing Auld Lang Syne. So it was, and so the Germans weren't that. Germans weren't as much fun as the McPhees.
Of course not.
This is an example of the McPhees. They loved to argue. They constantly were arguing. But if you got the upper hand, they'd switch sides.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was a great family. I mean, a very odd family, very emotionally constricted family. But, I mean, I knew Mother loved us because that was her job. But the word, no. But just once, years before Mom started to develop dementia, I was living in a house near where they were living in the continuing care facility. And Mother showed up unexpectedly. And I was taking a nap. And she laid down next to me and she told me she loved me. And I remember crying. And she said, I guess I should have said that more often. And we didn't talk about it ever again, but our life together as care partners unlocked all that love that had been waiting so long to express itself.
So maybe that's one of the other creative lessons that we can start earlier is just start expressing how much we love one another.
Yeah. It would have been good.
So now, after all these experiences, what does aging well mean to you?
Friends. Having friends. And having meaning, a really valuable meaning. I'm really lucky because of Mother. And I was still doing lots of talks about art. And this wonderful man named Richard Ferry heard me speak, and he sent me an email. We'd been just corresponding, and he'd been donating money to me, which was always nice. And he sent me an email saying, I have this idea. And I said, okay, I have a grant due on Thursday. I will get back to you on Friday, I promise. Okay. He said, okay. So on Friday, I hear from him, and he said, your silence is deafening. And I said, it's there. Just look, it's there. So he emailed 2 hours later, he said, all right, I found it. And so then I said, and your idea is brilliant. Your idea is visionary and wonderful. His idea was Maud's Awards. His wife had developed dementia in 2013. And like so many people, he didn't know what to do. And so he thought, well, I'll form this program where I will award money. I will make awards every year to interesting and innovative ideas in Alzheimer's care. And so every year he gives away $100,000 to acknowledge and share all these really great ideas. And I get to run it. So again, thanks, Mom. And so I've been running that. And so for me, that's a great gift, because it's a real gift to be able to continue to do good. And I have a group of people that I've met both in Seattle and around the country who are all engaged in this effort to change the narrative of dementia from despair to hope. And that's a wonderful, wonderful goal in life. So for me, I have purpose and I have friends.
Lovely. Let's take a brief pause to recognize one of the affiliate offerings that helps support the Aging Well podcast. As always, we're not sponsored and we don't accept paid placements. But when you use our affiliate links, it helps us continue producing this show. One product I genuinely enjoy is Firefly Organic Coffee, available through Jigsaw Health. It's thoughtfully sourced, organic, and crafted for people who care about what goes into their bodies, not just what wakes them up. I vetted it, I drink it myself, and I appreciate the care behind how it's made. If you'd like to support the podcast and check out Firefly Organic Coffee, you'll find the link in the show notes. Now, back to the show. Have you ever heard of Sam Simon, the dementia man?
Yeah, the dementia man, yeah.
I had him on the podcast several months ago, and just a beautiful conversation with him just to talk with. And it was totally different than I expected with somebody who has, full-blown dementia to be talking about their story. So just another great example of just getting creative and drawing out that creativity in people with dementia.
And it's good that you give that visibility, because again, it surprises people. They go back to, I had no idea, because you just write so many people off if you don't acknowledge the fact that these fabulous people who just keep giving and learning, just like us.
Yeah, my goal is to change the whole perspective of aging. Don't tell me how to age, and what to expect with aging, because we're all different. And speaking of, what are you doing personally to age well?
What am I doing personally? What?
To age well.
Oh,
Well, obviously you're volunteering and doing some of those things. You're writing books. What else?
Well, the most important, I have one category, which is, okay, there are certain things you can do to slow the advent of dementia, just because it runs in the family. So I'm always conscious of that, which is, hearing and sleep and having friends. That's the most important thing, having social contacts. I do one thing that I'm late this year, but I've been doing this for years, and it makes me so happy. At Christmas, I make cookies. These are not normal cookies. These are really extravagant cookies. So 2 years ago, I made 2,000 cookies using 80 pounds of butter, 47 different kinds of cookies. And these are not chocolate chip cookies. These are like miniature pecan pies. These are Linzer cookies. These are all sorts of fabulous cookies. And then I give them to people, and it makes people so happy. And I can't eat them because I'm not allowed to eat butter for various reasons. And so it's a passive aggressive gift on my part. But so I give these. So last year or 2 years ago, I gave out 47 boxes of cookies, enormous numbers of cookies. And once this is just a story from dementia days, but once when this woman named Evelyn, who was 104 years old, was living with mom in assisted living, and she didn't have dementia, but she was 104, and so she wasn't feeling well, and she announced to everyone, she said, "I think it's time for me to die." And everybody said, "Oh, Evelyn, we're going to miss you so much. You're such a wonderful person." And I said, "Evelyn, I'm going to make you some cookies." So I brought her this platter of these fabulous cookies, and she revived. And from then on, all of the ladies in assisted living decided that my cookies were the secret to a long life. And every time I got there, Ruby in particular would say, "Get in the kitchen and start cooking." So that I do things that make me happy and make other people happy. So that's one thing I do. And I see really good friends, and I try to walk more often. I used to be able to walk around a 3-mile lake in 19 minutes, but I can't do that anymore. But basically, I work too much. I have to slow down. But I try to bring happiness to people. That makes me happy, and it keeps me young, I think.
It's amazing that bringing happiness to other people could be so fulfilling for us.
Yeah, it makes one happy. And if you can't do that, I have one person in my orbit who has no friends, none, and doesn't really do anything except watch television. And it's like, she's one person that I worry could develop dementia because she's so incredibly isolated, which is not good. But when I talk to her, she says, "Everything's fine." Everything's fine. So, okay, fine. She likes the cookies, though.
Well, there you go. Keep baking her the cookies. You'll keep her going.
Yeah.
So we haven't talked a lot about your book yet, but what do you hope readers will take away from Don't Walk Away?
They'll see the joy that's in people who live with dementia. First of all, it's a happy book. It's a book that will make people laugh. So I stopped reading books about dementia because they were so depressing, and so I didn't want to read another one. But mine actually makes you laugh because it's funny. And it starts with my journey from absolute denial until this joyous life with mom and all of my mothers. And I'm hoping that it will be a bridge. It's like it's inviting people to take a walk with me and mom, first to get rid of people's fear, but also hopefully to provide a bridge for people to understanding that people living with dementia are wonderful human beings who need and deserve our support to live with happiness and to thrive. Because in this country, we are not doing a good job about supporting people who live with dementia and their care partners and their families. And partly I think it's because we don't think they're worth it. And until we believe that people living with dementia are worth it, are people just like us, until we believe that there is hope instead of sadness, that's not going to change. So my goal is to change the world.
An
and
admirable
make people
goal.
happy in the meantime.
Yeah. There you go. And I was going to ask you if listeners can remember one thing from today, what would it be? And I think you just told us that.
What was?
That, we need to understand that people with Alzheimer's are people, and,
they and their family members need our support, because literally, if you're juggling all of that without help, without respite, fortunately in Seattle, there's tons of things you can do. But even so, family caregivers, when I would tell people about the book, and I would say it's a book about it's about a journey that was joyous and hopeful. And this one woman I know who was a caregiver for her husband, she said, the word joy makes me nervous. I love the word hope. because it's hard to feel joy when you're overwhelmed with hope and it's just too much. But hope is good. So it's all about hope, that they are there. They're here. If you just know where to look.
Well, first of all, where can our viewers and listeners find the book, connect more with you?
Well, it's on Amazon. We just got word this morning it's on Amazon Kindle now. We're hoping it's going to be in Barnes & Noble soon, but right now it's on Amazon. And they can go to my website for the book, which is don'twalkaway.net, to find out more about it, to hear about podcasts, and to also get the link. The one thing I have learned is that if you're looking for it on Amazon, who knew? There are lots and lots of books called Don't Walk Away. They have nothing to do with dementia. So it's always important to add Don't Walk Away, A Care Partner's Journey, because otherwise you could be looking and looking and looking and give up.
Well, we'll put a specific link in the description notes too. So make sure people go right to it.
Right. And just remember, there's hope. And that if you have a family member who's living with dementia, they're there.
And take time to laugh.
And take time to laugh together. Yeah.
Well, anything else to add today?
No, just thank you very much. This has been fun.
Well, you're welcome. This has been probably more fun for me. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I just, you're only about 3 hours north of me, and I feel like, I'd love to just sit down and have coffee sometime and just tell jokes. So,
That'd be great.
Yeah. So we will make sure all those links are in the description note, and hopefully people will take away from this the very fundamental message of just connect with people, just listen and ask questions, or ask questions and listen. You want to ask the question first, probably, right? Yeah. So, well,
thank you,
Marilyn. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Just keep doing what you're doing and just keep aging well.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Aging Well podcast. Please like, subscribe, or follow, and share this episode with a friend. And be sure to visit the affiliate links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep aging well.